You are already on the path of awakening. It's time to transition from a life of struggle to a life of play. It's time to discover your autonomy, agency, sovereignty, and potency. Welcome to Reveal the Game of Life.
Welcome back to Reveal the Game of Life, the show where we talk about the very big, like the cosmos and why are we here, and the very small, like how do I get out of bed this morning without taking a cold shower? The cold shower thing is big. I've been following Twitter a lot lately. People are like, you just got to take more cold showers, bro. And it's like, that's pretty brutal to hear in the winter time, no? Anyway, I digress. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Tomaso, and I'm here with your other host,
Molly Mandelberg.
Ba, 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 ba. And today we're going to be talking about allowing your bigness. And you may not have any idea what that means. So another way to think about that is to calibrate, are you too much or not enough of something? And I think everybody can really identify with some part of themselves that they feel like is either too much or not enough. That's like not what society wants them to be. And as we allow our weird selves and our freak flags to fly, that we hit up against that limiting belief all the time. I know, especially if you want to be visible, if you're building a following, or you are leaning into a business that's more aligned with your spiritual gifts, then you're going to probably encounter this type of limiting belief. And the reason why is because your bigness is actually required in order for you to serve others the way that they want to best be served. You will not serve the world by playing small or trying to overcompensate for what you think are perceived flaws in yourself. And I know this is very personal to me because I'm a quantum wizard. Like, I'm still getting used to actually saying that with a straight face and like believing it and stepping into it and allowing the bigness and allowing things like galaxy braining about cold showers on a episode that has nothing to do with that is not being too much or not being weird and actually being exactly what this moment needs. So, Molly, I'm curious, what is your relationship to this dynamic?
Yeah. First off, great intro. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Love it. Yeah. And cold showers. I am with you on that. I love them and I don't do it every time because it would be brutal if you did. Yeah. So bigness, taking up space, questioning your worthiness, your enoughness. Is it an imposition to be you in the space that you're in right now? Like, how dare you? I just did a group hypnosis session a couple months ago about imposter syndrome. It's kind of the same thing. But I have walked this entire spectrum and I'll say from one end to the other, from absolute like stage fright and totally convinced that I was unworthy of being listened to. I had lots of programming from my evil stepfather growing up that I didn't know anything and that I should keep my mouth shut, not speak unless spoken to, that kind of shit. What it was a lot of programming to overcome. And so it took some time, some intention, some deep healing work to even just allow myself to speak and not question it. And I mean, that I think grew slowly through phases of then speaking to prove that I had something to say. And so that was like the middle end of the spectrum of like, no, I'm here to fucking talk. I have a point. I could be right. And a lot of like being stuck on how right I am or how wrong other people were and trying to lean into that as if that was actual like confidence or owning my power or something like that. And then moving beyond it where now I don't necessarily need to say everything that's in my head. If I have something to contribute to the conversation, I trust myself to show up and say it and add that to the mix. And I also am willing to trust myself if I'm feeling like I don't need to say this right now, that it's not coming from I shouldn't or I can't or I don't belong here in this space to say this. And it's more from an awareness of maybe this isn't the time to share that right now. But I have, I work with amazing, intuitive, healers, coaches, heart-centered people who have so much wisdom to share. And it is way, I don't want to say too, because we're getting away from this too much or too little, but it is utterly common and very normal for people to have a lot of fear of showing up in their bigness, showing up in their power, and having other people feel put out by it, or judgmental of it, or as if there's not enough space for other people because I'm taking up so much space over here. So what we want to, I'm hoping, do in this episode is give a little bit of permission that you get to find your way through that to the other side. My little dog is yipping in his sleep. We'll take that as confirmation from the universe that there's some cheering going on for this
Yeah.
conversation. That you get to take up space, and it doesn't actually take away from anyone else's space. And that when you are a stand for healing and for good and for magic and wisdom in this world, your taking up space actually creates more space for other people to step into that. There's a really beautiful quote. I know I talk about Abraham Hicks too much, but one of my favorite things that they said was, and I'm not going to say it verbatim, but basically, when you are willing to walk your path and share your magic and be in a state of thriving in your life, when you allow other people to see that, you're creating this tidal wave of energy that other people get caught up and brought along with you just by getting to see it. So you don't even have to teach people how to do it. You don't even have to tell them or hold their hand. Just you being willing to stand in that space lights other people's way to stand in that space. So it is worth doing. It is worth figuring it out. And of course, it frees you up to be your most potent, magical, authentic, empowered self as well. And who doesn't want more of that? So maybe let's start with, what are some ways to notice it, or begin treating ourselves more kindly in those places where maybe we're shutting down our bigness or convincing ourselves that we should shut up and be quiet?
Yeah. So I really like this frame of like it requires our bigness. And when we do that, when we step into that power authentically, we like give space for other people to do it, because we like the limiting belief of, if I take up too much space, it's like there's only so much space to take up, you know, and I'll shut out other people if I do that. In fact, the people who take up the most space right now, many of the people are people who are making it more difficult for other people to take up space, you know, in conversations and like discussions about even like the future of our society. But you were talking about kindness in recognizing what, when you're doing it. I'm trying to, so the thing that came to me when you were talking about this is, if you are kind of in this process of uncovering your spiritual gifts, or if you feel like you have access to information that's not here and now that you think is helpful, then you may have had this experience of like, I'm too much, like I can't actually share everything that's going on in my mind. Otherwise, like people aren't going to understand it. They're not going to hear it right, etc. And you're right that there is this like this calibration that happens when like there's a right timing, and you get better at recognizing the right timing when you let go of like, it's not okay for me to share this at all. Mm-hmm. Right? You say that it's good for me to share it, and now what's the right time? So I think one of the first indications that you might be experiencing this is if you have things that you feel like you want to share that would help others, but they're not going to be received well by the people around you, or you fear that that's the case. You know, like, for example, in some of my consultant work, like I have spiritual downloads that I think would be helpful for them to know, but I know that that's not going to go well, because this isn't a spiritual context where we're talking about this. And that's okay, because, you know, part of this is like, just because you have a download doesn't mean you have to share it, but that's a more nuanced point. I'd say kind of the first step to lean into it is to find others who are willing to see the sides of you, or not allow you, but who want you to express those parts of yourself. Whether that's friends, whether that's online communities. Even I found like listening to podcasts. Hey, you're listening to a podcast right now? It gives you permission, like, hey, other people are thinking about this, other people are talking about this, and then it feels less weird. So it's like
Yeah.
normalizing talking about weird stuff, however you can do that, whatever access you have. I'm super privileged that I have access to like a huge circle of spiritual turned on people who will not be the slightest bit weirded out when I full galaxy brain when I'm talking to them. And in
Yeah.
fact, want that. They like that. So that's really cool. What about you, Molly? What do
Yeah,
you
I
see
think
when
I can. I mean, if anybody out there read my book, Wild Hearts Rise Up, there was like a clear moment where I was first time in my life immersed in a community where this weird kind of shit I like to talk about and think about, this spiritual aspect of me, the first time in my life that everyone in this little group was having this kind of conversation, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not weird. This is actually, there's a place for this kind of conversation. And I had been shutting it down in different groups of my friends. I still shut it down around certain people because I know they can't hear it and they look at me like an alien. And that's
right?
okay. Not everybody has to get it. But it is important, I think, if we're in the process of revealing this magic that we be, to find people who will nurture it and hold space for it and meet us there, and those people exist. And those people like Chris and I, thanks for listening to our podcast, that they want to have that conversation with you too. And they want to like pull as much of it out of you as you're willing to like go there with them. And it's worth showing up to like meetup.com and finding the spiritual people in your area, or joining a group or a like event of some kind where it seems like that's going to be the vibe, so you can start building relationships with people. If you're in a normie muggle world and you find just one magical friend you can dish with on the cosmic adventure that you're on, that's enough to make you feel like you're not crazy. And that starts to build your stamina with, you know what, there are people who want to hear this kind of thing from me. There are people who will be in this conversation with me, and I'm going to start finding more of them. And then you get to go out in the world and do that. And on the other hand of the side of the coin, if you're already starting to step into that magic, maybe even cultivated, mastering a craft, a modality where it's on that far end of the spectrum, then your job is to be the beacon of that for other people who are like, I'm a little bit too weird for this muggle world. And you get to be like, hey, not only are you not too weird for all of us, but I'm right here willing to hold you in that space and do some big, deep work with you, whatever your modality may be. I think that's why my clients love me as much as they do, because they're like, wait, you're going to help me grow my business and strategies and technology and like content wise, but you're also speaking this language of like true consciousness. And I'm like, yeah, that does exist. And I know I'm not the only one doing that either, bridging the worlds of magic and business strategy. But it sounds like an absolutely foreign concept if you've been trying to grow a business and everyone you come across are these kind of, I don't say muggle with any judgment. We love muggles. They just aren't adept at these kinds of conversations. If all you've been finding is muggle business coaches and suddenly you find one like me, it's going to feel like, holy shit, that's exactly what I actually need. And I've had lots of people give that reflection of that experience, but that wouldn't be possible if I was continuing to run a business about growing businesses and coaching and yada, yada, forcing my magic into a little box thinking, oh, nobody wants this from me. It's way too weird. It's way too much. And if I were to start talking about that, too many people would be judging me as batshit crazy. It's like, no, some of the people think I'm batshit crazy and they get to think that. And the other ones are like, holy shit, I'm so glad I finally found you. Thank you for showing up. So I think partly it's recognizing that those people are out there literally waiting for you to ring the bell of your magic so they can go, oh, thank God that's out there. I can have some of that. Or I can be more of me because that's out there too.
Yeah. I wanted to say that on the flip side, maybe you're like get amped up and listen to this and you're like, yeah, I am going to be my weird self. And then if you find yourself like trying to convince other people to like believe what you believe, or like, you know, to examine their beliefs if they don't want to, I find that that can be, I used to do this all the time. Like I would just I would just indiscriminately talk about this stuff to like many people because I was like, no, like you need to learn this because I'm learning it. And what I really wanted was I wanted validation that what I was doing was good. And if I could convince enough other people that what I was doing was good, then it would be true.
Mm,
Right. And if you're doing that, then the next step forward is to recognize like this is sovereignty cuts both ways. Like you said, there's no judgment in being a muggle. Like everyone's a sovereign being. They're on their own personal journey. The more work you do on your own spiritual journey, the less judgment you have of other people. And it gets easier to let them, it doesn't necessarily get easier to be around them all the time because you want full self expression, but it gets easier to let them be where they are.
yeah.
Sometimes heartbreaking, but it gets easier.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel like you need to do anything. Also, when you do this as a business, like you find I only really want to connect with the people that are really lit up by this. Like, I don't want to use my spirit. I don't want to express myself to someone that's going to not reject me, but that is not going to see me. Right. And
Or yeah.
if you already know that, then, you get to choose the people to be with because it's the resonance of being with, of expressing yourself and being big around your people is like, it's worth all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. And it is scary. There's a nervous system response. Like who knows if it was this or, many other lifetimes where you were burned at the stake for being a witch because you liked like making tea out of herbs or something. Like there's plenty of rational justified reasons that you can come up with why it's safer to stay small, it's safer to hide your bigness, it's safer to keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, whatever the case may be. And yeah, I guess I wanted to have this episode to just remind you that it's safe to be your big magical self this lifetime. And if the people around you can't handle it, find new people, reach out, find ways to be surrounded by those of us who are as weird or similarly weird as you are and can hold you in that space to remind you it's okay. And that's when you start flexing that muscle of, okay, sometimes it's safe. Okay, now it's mostly safe. Okay, I am safe to be this big, to be this weird, that's audacious and powerful and owning of my magic. And I like that you brought up that need to convince others, that need for validation. I love my dad very much, and he is a soul seeker and non-duality like aficionado, but he very much needs other people to listen to him getting it for him to keep getting it. And that can be exhausting because oftentimes he's choosing people who are never gonna get it, that he wants to convince to get it with him so he can get it again. And it's like, okay, but what if you just had that conversation asking, can this person hear it? No, okay, who could I talk to that could hear it and wants to get lit up about this with me? And let me go talk to them about it. And then suddenly that resistance is gone because you're now talking to somebody who wants to be in that conversation with you and who's going to fuel the fire of that turn on you get from sharing your magic. It's a totally different game. It's like pushing water uphill versus riding a canoe downstream. Like it's a totally different experience of being in the boat on the water.
I wanted to, yeah, I love that you talked about safety, first of all. Um, I am safe. Like safety is so important to feel like psychologically, emotionally safe when it comes to especially expressing yourself in these unconventional ways. And that's something you get to practice, like as somebody who has sovereign power over their being, you can say like, I get to be safe, as like a mantra. Like I don't need to convince these people in order to be safe. Yeah, I get to be safe regardless, right? And then I think that there's a more slightly nuanced story that is insidious when you become somebody who wants to build a following. And there's this thought of, well, I have to convince people who might be willing, but they don't get it, but they could get it. And I'm the person who's there to convince them. And that's a more compassionate, less aggressive version of the same energy. The the more effective energy is I get to express my truth and the people will be there. And part of your truth may be explaining things in a way that other people have never heard before, and that helps them with this awareness, but they were open to it in the first place. You're not convincing them, you're just connecting with them in this sort of synergistic relationship. And it's a very nuanced point, but it is very important because energetically, this will really stop your forward progress if you have this perspective, and that's okay, and you get to be aware of that and you get to let that go, if you want, so you choose, and then you can just express yourself from your truth. I have this because there are other parts of my life that are more muggly, so to speak, more mind obsessed, where I'm like, y'all are thinking about it all wrong. Like, it's your beliefs, man. It's your paradigms. It's your mindsets. Like, this is not the way, and there's this belief like I have to find a way to get in their mental model and then blow it up from the inside using truth, beliefs, truth activating modalities. And that is basically saying, like, I don't get to have what I want unless I convince other people to believe something. So it's a very easy to slip into story.
Yeah, totally. And I think that there's a good point in there too, which is part of allowing your bigness is also allowing other people to have their reality, have their bigness if they choose it, have their smallness if they choose it, just as you should be allowed to have whatever state of being you're ready to claim right now, whatever grandiosity, expansion, or less that you want that works for you right now. There's nothing wrong or bad about it. There's nothing wrong with like being shy sometimes, or having a beautiful, wise thing to say and feeling like I don't feel like it right now. I don't feel like being the center of attention in this moment. It's okay. It's all okay. And it's okay for other people too. I think years ago, sometimes it'll still come up from time to time, but I felt really triggered or threatened when someone was just so audaciously loud and taking up space, and that I thought I didn't want to be that. And when I was willing to actually look at why that bothered me, is because I wasn't giving myself permission to take up space when I wanted to and be my audacious self when I felt like being that wild and out there and crazy and intense or flirtatious or sexy or whatever the out there bigness I wasn't willing to be yet. That it's abrasive to witness it in someone else when they're willing to be something that you're not willing to be yet. So I think that works as a really great guidance system, is if somebody's being so much, what you would say too much, what quality of too muchness are they being that's activating you? And is there actually a part of you that would like more of that energy? And can you appreciate that their willingness to be that has actually instigated a new direction for you or a new opening for you? And that maybe they were coming into your life and being that way for you to simply have that awareness and that experience so you could choose something different for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like, so often like our triggers are like greatest growth. Like, they're literally a trigger to a new reality. So, and I love that question. I kind of want to just ask that question to the listeners. Like, how can you give yourself permission to be your most bold, audacious, big self?
Yeah. What would that look like?
What would that look
Would you
like?
dress different? Would you speak different? Would you stand different? Would you show up in your life or your business or your profession different? Would you communicate differently in a relationship? Would you speak to your kids different? Like,
Yeah.
what are all the different ways that would look?
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty cool.
that is cool.
Yeah.
Um, there's, yeah, there's this kind of perspective of I can't be this, like, there's only so many people can be this loud,
Or else it would be just so loud.
or else it would be so loud. Well, to be fair, have you been on social media lately? There's a lot of people talking really loud. And actually, there was someone I follow on Twitter. She talked about how like what's your relationship with being cringe?
Cringe.
Cringe.
I'm
If you
I'm not sure if
if
I've.
you think you are being cringeworthy,
Mm,
like that's your judgment of your own bigness, basically.
mm-hmm.
You know, like what you find cringy is again that it could you let go of what you find cringy and just like let yourself be as big as you want to be. So
Yeah.
I think cringe is another great guidance system. Like, do you find cringy what other people do and also what you might do or what you're afraid of doing? Ooh, that's a good question. Like,
That's an interesting lens. Yeah, I'm excited to look at
yeah,
social media through the lens of cringe. What's making me cringe?
yeah. And like, who would you be without that? Like, if you couldn't be too cringy, what would you let yourself do? There's all kinds of things like, oh, I couldn't do that because that's like, like I couldn't message that person. I couldn't say this to that person. That's too bold. That's too scary.
Mm,
Like, what would you do if you had no fear? Because cringe is really a fear of kind of repercussion, like rejection by others.
hmm.
And that's really what this is. Bigness is
A fear of judgment.
it it's a fear of judgment. It's a fear of social tribal judgment, which totally makes sense because you talk about the witch wound, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's this fear of actual like social persecution.
Yeah.
And so
Which
this is
plenty of
big.
us have had experiences of. I mean,
Yeah.
children are pretty mean growing up.
Right?
I don't know. Elementary school, there were bullies, and junior high too. There were people who were ready to judge you out loud in front of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that creates this like an early life filter of, oh, if I just don't be too much, then that won't happen to me as often.
And it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you were enough, not even too much, if you were just enough, then you might be able to create circumstance. Like so many of the things we want in life are related to people. It's why one of the things I focus on a lot is like soft skills because eventually you want to make something happen. Eventually you're going to hit a person that's like a roadblock, right? And so what would be possible for you if you had no fear of like repercussion from people? Like who would you message? What would you say?
Yeah. That's a valuable question. Yeah. And from the business lens too is if you, well, the thing is, you're going to be judged no matter what. So if you can't stop judgment from happening, wouldn't you rather stand in your power than not? Wouldn't you
Mm,
rather speak up and share your truth than not?
yeah.
Because in my interesting point of view, you're not graced with this path for no reason. You have an idea because you're the person who needs to bring that idea to life. And to shy away from that is to sort of like throttle your magic and say, I'm not sharing this. I
Yeah.
can't. It's too much. It's like, okay, well, what would giving yourself a little bit more permission would that look like? And any idea that occurs to you is worthy of your attention. In my opinion, that's a quote by someone, I forget their name, William something. Anyway,
We're doing great with the references on this
right.
episode. I'm like,
Yeah.
somebody on Twitter, look them up.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully this episode gave y'all a little more permission. Do you want to close us out? I think we're out of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hopefully this will give you some place for self-inquiry and also maybe a lens on next time you find yourself judging someone for being too loud and where you can go with that and a way to give yourself permission to occupy the throne that is just for you so you can speak the message that is just for your people.
Mm.
If you resonate with this and you would like to find more of your people, then we are available because we do this because we love it and because this is an expression of who we are. So check us out at revealthegameoflife.com. Check us out on our socials. I'm Chris_Tomaso. You can see Reveal the Game of Life on Instagram. Molly usually does this part, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna risk being cringy. Or or email us at the email address that I don't actually know.
Reveal the game of life at gmail.com.
Revealthegameoflife@gmail.com. And or please leave us a review telling you what really lit you up about this. Reviews help create more visibility for us and help get the message out. So please share your truth and take what's true for you and leave the rest. Anything to say, Molly?
Yeah, if you dug this episode, share it with a friend. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you guys on another episode soon.
Catch you later.
Bye.